right, people. Welcome to Karakol City and welcome Mr. John.
JJ. We're both
Yes. And by the way, guys, you guys remember my English name is also Jonathon. So this is John and Jonathon. So I think most of our audience is curious, how did you end up coming to Karakol City? What happened wrong or what happened great? So your little story.
I mean, it's going to get political because obviously we've got the COVID pandemic. So that was the origin of why I came to Kyrgyzstan as a whole. And having travelled here before and seen all the various cities and regions, I felt that Karakol was the nicest place.
Cool. That's wonderful. And of course, our audience is probably curious about your background. What did you study and what are your hobbies? Just in brief about you.
I'm still a student. I'm a lifelong student, so like 11 plus years. And yeah, that enables me to kind of sit here and chill and relax and get interrogated by you.
That's great. I like your general answers. These are amazing, you know. It really reflects your cool thinking to know when to say what. That's great. I really like that. So speaking of education, I got to know that you are currently doing your PhD, right?
No, I'm about to start my PhD in a few months. I'm doing my MA now, and I've done many undergraduates. So I kind of just keep enrolling in various courses that I'm interested in, and that enables me to travel around.
Cool. What kind of undergraduate programs you went through?
Aviation management, education, international development, journalism, which I hated, and social anthropology, which was definitely the most interesting.
Wow, and you really strike me as a person who loves knowledge, who strives for knowledge and for development. And what really made you to become this type of person? What happened in your life that you pursued education?
I think people that pursue knowledge are those that aren't content with the narrative that's provided by the state. So it's not so much knowledge, but it's truth. I mean, knowledge is subjective and and can be kind of falsified in a way. Take history, for example. No matter who you ask, no matter what country you go to, there's always going to be a different perception of what's right and wrong. But the only way to really uncover the truth is to delve deep into literature and various other books and resources and find the position that you feel is comfortable for you. So I guess it's kind of like a crusade for truth. We could call it that.
Did you come up to such thinking because of reading certain books, or was it certain mentors that inspired you or motivated you, or certain professors?
That's a good question. I think I don't think I can answer the question, to be honest. I mean, I went to a normal school with normal people, and I wouldn't necessarily say that most people pursue the same level of kind of investigation. So I think it's just chance. I mean, who knows how the human mind operates and how it comes to be what it is. I think it's just a matter of a higher power, perhaps. Who knows?
Cool. Maybe you can share a little bit about your family. Is your family into education? What type of professions are they in? And your siblings, perhaps?
I'm an only child, so that means I'm spoiled, as all only children are. I don't know if you have the same term in Kyrgyzstan, but in England, only child means I have no siblings. My father was in the military and my mother was in, let me try and explain this, like kind of commercial development for the state. So state resources like the building of hospitals or anything entailing public resources, basically.
When you told your parents, hey, I'm going to Kyrgyzstan, what was their reaction?
I don't think it's something particularly unique for them. I've been traveling since I was like 19. I'm 29 years old now, by the way.
Are you serious?
So for 10 years I've experienced quite a lot of different countries. So I think it's just something that fits in for people I know. It's nothing particularly unique as far as they're concerned. It's just, he's in another place again. We'll let him do his thing.
Cool. And I'm curious, how did you end up first time finding about Kyrgyzstan? Was it just on Google or watching YouTube? How did it happen?
That's a good question. So when I was younger, one of my aims in life was to visit every country on the planet. And that's quite a big aim. That's quite a big objective, quite a big mission statement, if you like. And I think the more you live, the more you realize that although it's feasible to do, it's more interesting spending more time in countries as opposed to just running through them just to kind of tick them off the list. So yeah, I mean, Kyrgyzstan was of course on the list, as every country was, and I ended up here. And yeah, I really liked it. Really good vibe. I went to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and this, here on the same trip. And for me, it was worth coming back to.
So you were just looking at your list and you're like, okay, we've got this guy, this country.
Literally, that's exactly what I was doing. Yeah, really. Ticking them off one by one. But then, the older you get, the more you realize that if you want to explore a country to kind of the depths, you need to spend a lot of time, or a lot more time than you ordinarily would on, let's say, a standard 2-week vacation or a standard 1-week vacation. You really need to spend months minimum in a place to get a vibe.
Wow. So what was the year you came here first time?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it's 2017. I mean, everything merges into kind of one, and that's been, it's about 5 years ago now, but I think it was on the same trip as Kazakhstan, and that was 2017. So I'll go with 2017. So I'm sure a lot has changed for you, for the world in that time, of course. But yeah, I'm glad I did come here, because otherwise I wouldn't be here again.
Wow. So in this case, 2017 was your first time, and then is this your second time you came back, or what?
This is kind of like the second time, yeah. I mean, I've been technically here around a year. However, from time to time, for visa issues as well, you just have to go to Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, go across the border, get stamped out, get stamped back in. So, I mean, it's basically about a year on this trip, which is great. I love it. It's amazing.
Cool. And if you look at your list, how many countries in total have you checked in? So
if we get political and we include certain countries that aren't regarded by the United Nations or the West, I say that loosely, it's just over 100.
Wow.
Yeah. But
this is really impressive.
There are countries places that I would include as countries, like Abkhazia, which is kind of like a break-off state within Georgia, but they view themselves as an independent nation. Places like Transnistria, which is part of Moldova. So we can accumulate more depending on how you feel about what it is that makes a country truly independent. But we won't go down that road, because we could be here all day.
Wow. You strike me as an ideal type of professor that I can imagine. Is this what you're thinking of to do in the future?
No, I don't think I'd have the patience, to be honest, to be a teacher. I would rather just confine myself to books and knowledge and traveling, I think. Who knows, though? Maybe the future holds something that I don't anticipate at this moment. But no, I don't intend to be a professor. You can't force me to do that too.
Wow. What are the spheres you're potentially interested in? Maybe journalism or travel blogger, or I don't know, what are the things?
I think so the program I'm doing now, the MA, is International Development and Global Politics, is the title of that program, which obviously incorporates a job role that would entail going to various countries and analysing the infrastructure and analysing the positives and negatives and trying to find a way by which to better the lives for most people. Though that is the program, I'm more interested in the research itself, so investigating kind of the more sinister aspects of that lifestyle, things like corruption, things like economics, and how economies truly operate and where the money goes, which I'm sure everyone in the world would be interested to find out. So it's more of a research angle as opposed to a practical application.
Mm-hmm. Is your current research somehow related about Kyrgyzstan?
It has no relation to Kyrgyzstan, although perhaps I should have done something related to Kyrgyzstan, because it would make my life much, much easier. No, it's actually related to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which, for those that might not know, is the largest country in Africa, and it's located right in the middle, and is filled with an abundance of resources, whether it's cobalt or gold, diamonds, etc. And because of that, obviously, it commands a lot of attention, but ironically, it doesn't have any influence of its own. So everyone wants a slice of the pie without actually paying for the pie. That's the best way I can analyze what's happening there.
It reminds me of the situation in Kyrgyzstan, the same, that other countries want to take the resources we have and use it as much as possible. And so what do you think about this idea of resources being the curse for the countries, because other countries who have no resources, like Japan and Israel, they seem to flourish without any resources.
I mean, I think there's various historical reasons as to why certain countries have become more, let's say, developed or more prominent economically. I do think that having resource is a curse if you're unfortunate enough not to have been in a situation to defend your resources against outside influence, whether that's, you know, foreign countries looking to invade, whether that's foreign business interests looking to exploit. I think, frankly, you know, it's a far too complicated subject, I think, for anyone to understand, if indeed anyone does understand it. I think there's various long-winded historical connotations and historical scenarios that have led to where we all are on the planet now. And I think we just have to make the best of it. But I would say that the most important thing is social cohesion. I think when people develop communities and develop a community-based ethos, you know, a lot of positivity comes from that. And that's at the forefront of my interest, finding ways to sponsor, you know, partnerships between people. Because that's what creates social strength, unity, and a secure, strong country.
But what do you think about this problem? You have a community, but they have zero education. Then what kind of result can you expect from them?
Well, I don't think education in the standardized form is necessarily the issue, although it is, of course, an important thing. I think morality is more important than education. So, for an example, most people in the West, say Europe, the US, they can all read and write, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have integrity and a moral compass and that they do the right thing on a daily basis. Whereas you could take someone that doesn't have any money in their pocket, perhaps they can't read, they can't write, but spiritually speaking, they're far more inclined to pursue a moral goal. You know, they're kind to their neighbors, their families, you know, they're willing to give and not take. So I don't necessarily think it's about educating people in a school always, although this can be helpful, of course, but it's about teaching them what is important and what is necessary to secure a true community.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, what's the role of literature, classical literature, in terms of bringing to the community this sense of, I don't know, good morals that you're talking about?
I mean, I wouldn't focus specifically on literature, but I would say as a part of the arts, you know, music, literature, anything that's incorporated within that field is no doubt important because it gives people variety in their life. And without sounding cheesy, as we say in England, there's a saying, variety is the spice of life, because of course the more you do and the more experience, the more character you build as an individual, and that's what creates a strong person and someone usually that has a moral compass. It's all about giving people different opportunities, allowing them to listen to different music, to undertake different activities, whether that's reading, whether that's sports, whether that's exploring, you know, various other countries and places. It's all about trying to expand the number of things people experience in their life, and that's especially true for children because, of course, you know, a child's mind is like a sponge. It absorbs everything far, far quicker than what it is for us now as progressively older men. But you know, teaching children a set of standards from an early age is the most important thing, in my opinion.
When you talk about moral compass, it a little bit reminds me of Immanuel Kant's teaching. Is that the case?
I can't say I'm an expert on Kant. I know you're a lover of philosophy, so I couldn't comment on the intricacies surrounding his theory. So you'd have to elaborate on that, I think, for me. That's all I can say.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And can you talk a little bit more about that moral compass idea that you're talking about? Certain values? Are you talking about certain principles, or? I
mean, it's more again of a saying in England. It's not necessarily fixed upon a certain specific idea. It's just the notion that, you know, things like murder or stealing or all the stereotypically bad things in the world are, of course, going to be on one side of that compass. Whereas helping people and being charitable and doing things that are atypically considered to be good, you know, loving one's, you know, parents, children, all these kind of things, and trying to be progressive intellectually, socially, and morally. I mean, I guess if we take this line, we're going to go into a very deep discussion as to, you know, what it is that creates morality, what in fact is morality. But again, I think if we go down that road, we'll be here for another 25 years, because I don't think anyone's ever answered that question. And though I haven't read Immanuel Kant properly or expansively, I imagine not even he concluded it.
It also reminds me of Sam Harris's Moral Compass book that he wrote about. Is it related?
Sam Harris is. I haven't read his book, but again, another philosopher. I'm sure he can list many. I've watched a brief interview with Sam Harris, and he seems like he's got his head firmly on his shoulders, and he has some very intriguing perspectives. And before you mentioned Jordan Peterson, I thought you might be thinking of him. I would say he's on the same level intellectually, and I would hope that more people have the possibility to read him. Having not read him myself, but having seen him through interview form, I would say that he comes across as a worthy man to uncover and learn from.
Great. Let me now jump into another topic that our audience will be definitely curious about, is that most of our audience is teenagers. They are roughly 12 to 18, some of them older than 20. So, and their main issues that they're facing right now is the absence of interest in schools, because schools still run in Soviet Union system, absence of interest in life in general. They are trapped into this South Korean weird K-pop culture and anime culture. They're stuck in their little bubbles, and it seems to be some degradation form happening. What's your comment on that?
Complex issue. I would say, I can't say I'm a fan of K-pop, so sorry for all K-pop fans out there. Certainly not my music scene. I think the biggest problem with youth today, and again, I can't comment on the Soviet education system and the relic of that, which is still, I guess, prevalent in a lot of former Soviet Union countries, whether it's Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan or Tajikistan. But I think the biggest problem, and it's somewhat ironic because we're using technology now, is of course social media platforms and how reliant we've become on them. And how instead of perhaps going to a cafe or a park and socializing and interacting with our friends in physical form, and albeit traditional form, where we play a sport or we play a board game, people, instead of playing video games and chatting via text messenger services like WhatsApp or what is now called Meta Messenger, and I think that's making people socially inept. The skills that you learn from, for instance, having this conversation and seeing the facial expressions and the tone of voice, is something that builds a character which you just can't attain from discussion via your mobile phone. It's a very different thing, and I would say that my experience of Western countries, which of course have a lot more technological advancement and mobile phones and laptops are readily accessible to all, I would say that it has definitely diminished not just the intellectual capacity of people, but again their social skills, and you could even go back down the moral pathway and pursue to what level it's impacted on morality. So I would say technology, if used incorrectly, is a very dangerous thing. So teenagers, get out, play football.
Get out of here.
Speak with your friends, drink coffee, but not too much, just for social reasons, preferably chai. And I think that's the way forward, and I think you'll learn a lot more from doing that.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty true.
As you were talking about this topic, I slightly paid attention to the way you speak, eloquently, beautifully, I would say. And how would other people...
Very kind of you.
Yeah, and how would other people, and especially teenagers, can learn to speak like you? Because very often I see youngsters not being able to express their thoughts, being very short in their phrases and confused in their phrases, to using too many tick words, or how do you call that?
Like keywords.
Yeah, and and also the absence of focus on one topic. They cannot concentrate on one topic. They immediately forget. So how what's your advice on that?
So I'll split that question into two parts. Your first question, how can someone, perhaps, that's very kind of you, speak eloquently? I would say you have to know who you are, and you have to be comfortable with who you are as a person, because once you're comfortable with yourself, you'll find the direction that you're looking for in life. And to be comfortable returns ourselves to what we were talking about earlier in regards to variety and how variety is the spice of life. The more things you'll do with your life, the more you'll learn more about yourself and who you are and what direction you want to pursue. And with that, I think, comes eloquence. The second part of your question, you have to quickly remind me what that was.
Yeah, the second part is, how can they, in addition to learning, how can they imitate you in terms of speaking exactly like you? What maybe certain tips that you can give them?
So aside from, doing as much as possible, I would say, I think classic film, classic music, I think if they're learning to speak English, which is of course a different thing for myself, being a native-born English speaker and monolingual. Sadly, I don't speak, as of yet, a second language. Bits and pieces from here to there, but hopefully I can learn perhaps Russian or Spanish or something in the next couple of years. But I think for someone wanting to learn English to the best of their ability, try and go back to the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s and utilize websites like, for instance, IMDb, which will list, films from that era with a very, very high standard. It's not too tricky to find pieces of music, pieces of literature, anything within the field of art which is highly regarded throughout the world as something that's prime and a necessity for anyone interested in not just art, but again, learning English. And I think that's advantageous for people who aren't native English speakers, because you have so many resources available to you in English that I'm almost jealous. I wish there was as many in perhaps Russian or Spanish. But I think that's a good pathway to choose, especially if you're interested in film and music. Every day perhaps try and find a new album from a new year, put it on while you're cooking or doing a bit of sport and exercise, or when you wake up in the morning, and eventually your brain is going to kind of acclimatize, for lack of a better word, to what you're hearing.
Are you single now, right?
Am I single? Oh my God, yes I am, but out of choice.
Out of choice?
Out of choice, yeah. I've had ex-girlfriends, and when you're traveling and when you're undertaking, an important part in your, let's say, academic career, and I say that loosely because I don't think career is the right word, but it's good to kind of focus on specific things at specific times. So, being that I'm transferring from my MA to my PhD, I want to ensure that I get the best grade at the moment, and then, perhaps over the summer I can explore kind of, the relationship side of things. But for now, I need to finish my thesis and make sure it's not terrible.
All right. And would you consider an option of finding someone here locally?
Are you offering me a Kyrgyz wife?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
What this interview's really about. Am I going to see some ladies, leave this lounge over here, and you're gonna pick me on? No, I at the moment, I don't know. I think having travelled to so many places, I'm still undecided as to what kind of person I'm looking for. And I think it depends on the type of culture I end up preferring. Out of all the places I've been, I obviously love Kyrgyzstan in terms of the people, the nature, the food actually is delicious. But I think I'll need to travel to a few more places to discover the type of character that I'm looking for, I think.
Cool, that's a great answer, I would say. Also, what our audience might be curious of is you travel to about 100 countries or so, and I'm sure you encountered different...
I was going to say it's tiring. It's tiring. Hopefully not too many.
I see. And you met different types of people with different thinking, mentality, and so on and so forth. What are the things you discovered about people after traveling in so many countries?
So I'll try and be positive, but of course, in the scale of good and bad, the moment you appreciate a country, you appreciate it because you're comparing it to something else. So every time you appreciate something for its worth and you say, oh, that's good, that's great, that's magnificent, that's amazing, that's because there's probably something else you've experienced which is very much the opposite. So it is true, of course, if you travel anywhere, it doesn't have to be another country. I'm sure if you travel to different cities within your own country, Kyrgyzstan, if you go to Osh, Karakol, Narin, Bishkek, you're going to find places that you prefer and places that you prefer less. And I think that's a good way of looking at it because, taking a positive attitude, I think, is really important, again, for building character. And it's also not the most appropriate thing to be, horrible about other cultures, though I can say that there are things I don't like. An example might be, let's look at, there's a lot of homelessness in the United States and in my own country, in the United Kingdom. If you travel to I don't know, Slovenia, Kyrgyzstan, perhaps even Iran, you won't see anywhere near the number of people that are in, serious issues with their life than what you would see in so-called developed countries. So I think that's a big issue and a big thing that perhaps people don't realize that come from, non-European nations or places outside of North America, that in those countries there are problems that I don't think any country would wish on their own people. But that's what gives you kind of some insight and some enlightenment as to what morality is, going once again back to values. When you see things that are, good and bad, it gives you a balance and a scale that you can apply to your own life and hopefully apply to others in a positive way.
Wow, you seem to be very nice about reflecting about people.
Only for this interview. Usually I'm not nice at all. I'm on my best behavior.
And you also saw maybe quite a good amount of Kyrgyzstani people.
Yes.
And what can you say generally about our good sides and the sides that can be improved, or negative sides?
I don't think there's any negative sides. Actually, no, there is. The roads. Some of the roads could be improved because, when you take a 7 or 8 hour journey, perhaps from Kochkor to Narin, sometimes it could be quite bumpy. And if you're not used to these roads as a tourist, it can make your tummy feel not so great. So perhaps some road improvement. But with regards to the positives, there's so many. I mean, I could list your food, ganfan, delicious, boso lagman, ashlam food, all the atypical cuisines that you have to try as a tourist. But people in general are very, very friendly, very hospitable. I mean, this interview is a prime example of this. Everyone's very friendly, whether you go to a coffee shop, whether you meet someone in the street, whether you meet someone running in a park, at a sports event. It feels very safe, and I think that's a derivative of the friendliness of people. And I think people have the community and their families at the forefront of their priorities, which for me I would say is the biggest bonus in this country and the most important factor, because very sadly in a lot of European countries like the UK, France, Germany, and in North America, Canada and the US, people don't place enough priority on their families, and I think that's going to be I won't go as far as to say the destruction of those cultures, but it's definitely putting them on the wrong path, my country included, and I think family should always be the priority.
Cool. Another quite different topic is, as you know, we hit 2020, I think, COVID, right? COVID had hit the world, and
Sure.
it really kind of changed the world in many sense. And what's your thought on that? What will be our life in the future? Just your thoughts on this.
I think a lot of business was. I think the pandemic brought about a lot of exploits by big business. I mean, technology, as we talked about briefly, has obviously been staggering in the last number of years. You can get Google Glasses. You can Skype people and have been able to for probably the last 15 years or so. And technology is increasing at such a rapid rate. Not always for positive things, as we talked about with how kids use Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp and social networks perhaps too much. I think the pandemic allowed big corporations, big tech companies to try and maintain a pressure to sustain restrictions because they benefited financially from these restrictions being kept in place. I think a lot of people suffered, and not directly from COVID, but I think a lot of people actually suffered from being incapacitated, being able to go to the supermarket, being able to socialize with their friends. I mean, in Europe, I know a lot of children suffer from mental health issues and stuff like that, being that school was closed for so long and that people couldn't interact with their friends. And, especially for children more than adults, that's a very important thing. They're growing. They need to be able to build these characteristics very, very early on to have a chance in later life of having a strong character. So I think, the impact we're yet to see, actually. We're yet to see it. I think in 10, 15 years we're going to see some sadly large-scale negative consequences of all of these restrictions, which are still in place in many countries today. I'm not sure if everybody realizes it in Kyrgyzstan, which for me is the best country. Again, why I'm here, because you're able to go to a coffee shop, you're able to have a drink, speak with your friends, go to a restaurant without being told by police or governments that what you're doing is illegal and you might be fined. You might even be put in jail. In some countries, that's very much a possibility. So I think a lot of exploitation has taken place, and the only way for people to become aware of these exploits is through these conversations that we're having now, whether it's something that's going to be uploaded to the internet for people to see, or whether it's just going to a talking club or going to, you know, your university after school events and making sure you talk about these things. And don't be scared to have a controversial opinion. That's an important thing in life. You know, being able to disagree with someone is what builds character. If you find yourself in life in too many situations where you're always agreeing with your friends, try and find more friends that you disagree with, because that's going to help you.
That's a very nice advice, I would say. Very cool. Yeah, your thoughts about COVID is it was interesting, and the last thing what you talked about was what was the last point you said?
I think diversifying your friend group is really, really important. I think if you find yourself always agreeing with what your friends are saying, either you're perhaps too scared or you don't have the confidence to try and dispute them, or likewise it might be the case for them. You know, I think everybody in society today is always looking to agree with one another, because that's the easy way to live life. If you always agree, it makes each step easier in theory in the present moment, but in the future you're going to be at a massive disadvantage, because it's through disagreement, it's through controversy, and it's through the debate that you build character, and the person you're debating and disputing with builds character. That's how we learn and attain knowledge, through discussion, through disputes, sometimes heartache, sometimes anger, but it's all a positive in the end.
Cool. That was a very nice quote that I actually probably highlighted in the video. That was a really nice one on the fact that building character through debates and arguments and logically thinking. That's a very good point. We'll definitely highlight it.